The next item is item number 25, application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 15-6906, block 1196, lot 29, 225 Central Park West, in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District, a neo-Renaissance style apartment hotel building designed by Emery Roth and built in 1925 to 26. This is an application to establish a master plan governing the future installation of windows.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ryan Walsh, Preservation Department staff. The subject premises is located at West 82nd Street in Central Park West, and the applicant is proposing a master plan to install 1/1 double hung windows on the primary facades. The important thing to note at this point, or for this application, is that historically, or why it's here in front of the Commission, the historic window configuration is 6/1 and 10/1 at the primary facades. So Mike Robarge from Panorama Windows is here to talk more about the application.
But are there any windows currently which
There
are?
are no current historic windows.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mike Robarge, Panorama Windows. We are basically putting together or proposing a master plan in order to provide the building board and management of the building a way for residents to follow some guidelines in terms of window replacement as they move forward. The present windows have all been replaced on the primary facades as well as the inner courtyard area. The existing windows that had been, or the replacement windows in presently were put within wood master frames. Unfortunately, the master frames had been cut away in terms of the brick mold detail. The one change that we proposed is to do a simplified brick mold rather than what is existing.
Existing windows are replacements installed when? Do you have any idea?
Roughly 15 to 20 years ago. These are two historic text map photos showing the facades, the primary facades of the building. Presently, we've shown each of the facade elevations and the configuration that presently exists. And then here you can see the detail. The original brick mold was cut away and they just did some bent capping. What we're proposing is a simplified brick mold with a slight detail right here and a slight step back to the window that we'd be replacing. And this is just another section detail showing the mullion details for those units that have either a two-part or a three-part window within the opening. And then we've also carried that detail to the mullions, as you can see here. And we've also kept with the existing spacing of the mullions.
Do you have any sense of the size of the new mullion compared to?
The existing mullion is 14 5/8. What we would do is take it back to 12. The existing one was done due to the fact that this sort of capping detail, which is not historic to the building.
What is that capping detail that you're proposing? Historic?
It's a detail that has been, we've found it in several, it's basically an old wood detail with a slight detail here, as you can see in your handouts.
So to answer the question, I guess it's a,
Rather
you
than
would,
just-
you would say it's more historic detail than what they have right now, and
Well, right
you're-
now, all they did was
Right.
they cut away the existing brick mold and just bent
Mhm, okay,
a piece of aluminum.
all right. And the treatment of this would in fact be in a color which is more historic in
Right,
terms of its
yes.
color. Okay. Yes.
Question.
Yes, go ahead.
So how does this approach like enhance the building as opposed to more or less continue in the tradition of what's been done since? You know,
Well,
what's
we're-
been done?
In other words, why isn't it 671?
No, that's not really my question. My question is,
That'll be
how
my
does it, that'll be your question. How does it enhance? I mean, the build, you know, in other words, you look at the photographs that you have of the existing aluminum windows, and it's actually kind of sad. And it's particularly sad because they're only 15 or 20 years old. So the second part of my question was going to be, and what are you going to do to make sure that these windows don't have to be replaced in 15 or 20 years? What's different?
Well, the difference is that the new windows will have, basically, the existing windows provide no energy efficiency.
No,
They're-
but that's not why they're failing. They're failing because those cheesy little
Well,
rods
yes.
break in half, and that's the end, that you're done with your
Your
window.
balance system, yes. Many of the balances do not work, and the windows will not stay up, or they come down and don't go back up.
And your windows
Right.
are different now.
Well, the new windows have new balance systems that the existing windows did not use at this time when these type of windows were manufactured.
Like, what kind of a balance system?
It's an ultralift balance system, so
Ultralift?
yes.
What's that?
Essentially, it's designed for the window, so we create the balance system that fits within there that takes the weight of the glass.
All right.
All right, any other questions?
I want
Yes.
to know why
Any-
not 6/1.
All right, we'll get to that discussion, I'm sure, in a while. Do you want to say anything right now?
Well, no, I just wondered about your answer.
Right now, presently, there's only a handful of residents that were looking to replace the windows, and the building felt that they needed to have a master plan put in place in order to provide some guidelines for the replacement of windows, how the new windows would be installed in terms of waterproofing.
In other words, no reason.
So,
Like all
essentially-
other co-op owners, they want to.
we were essentially attempting to avoid a checkerboard effect with just a handful of windows being replaced and then having that stay for the next 10 years possibly until someone else decided they wanted
The windows
to
won't
proceed
last
forward.
another 10 years, no worry.
All right, why do we save that for discussion instead? And are there any more questions right now? Okay. This is Community Board 7. The committee realized that since none of the original windows remain, this would result in disrupting uniformity of the 1/1 fenestration patterns. Okay, so I'm just cutting to the chase. Introducing erratic disorder into what is currently a clean and uniform fenestration pattern is not desirable. Therefore, Community Board 7 approves the building-wide window master plan. So they've supported it. We have speakers on this item. Kelly Carroll.
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. 225 Central Park West, also known as Hotel Alden, is one of Emery Roth's more austere compositions along Central Park West. Larger buildings like this one rely on their fenestration pattern as a significant design component. Hotel Alden historically had a 6/1 and 10/1 arrangement on portions of its primary facade. HDC asks that in the creation of a master plan, more historic research is needed to inform the design of all future windows. Thank you.
And thank you. The next speaker is Arlene Simon.
Good afternoon. It's Arlene Simon, Landmark West, and I'm speaking for our Certificate Appropriators Committee. Landmark West is a nonprofit community organization committed to the preservation of the architectural heritage of the Upper West Side. The Alden, originally built as an apartment hotel, is one of architect Emery Roth's signature residential constructions. As Stephen Rottenberg said in Mansions in the Clouds when he wrote the book, places it in the same category as the Dorset and the Drake. In the 1920s, it became more convenient for middle-class families to rent an apartment hotel suite than a typical apartment because of the services and amenities provided. The Roths themselves ended up moving into an apartment hotel in 1932, for which they chose the Alden. The LPC's window guidelines, those are your guidelines, quote, "It is important to retain the configuration, operation, details, material, and finish of the original windows, as well as to maintain the size of the openings, the sills, and the decorative moldings, and the sash itself," close quote. It is clear from historic photographs and documentation that two principal building facades of 225 Central Park West featured 6/1 and 8/1 double-hung wooden windows. If the applicant is to submit a master plan, it should be one that provides for a comprehensive return to Emery Roth's original concept. The Alden Apartment Hotel was originally designed in a relatively austere manner with a solid brick facade, rusticated limestone base, and minimal terracotta ornamentation. The variegated texture of the windows served to offset the building's otherwise restrained effect. The austerity of the building itself is why the multi-light windows play such an important role. Examples of the conservative facades counterbalanced by lively window sashes abound throughout New York and especially on the West Side. Three include 241 Central Park West and 115 West 86th Street and the Century Apartments. The unfortunate replacement with 1/1 aluminum sash over time has neutered the facade's original impact and has resulted in a muted, bland effect. This is a golden opportunity for the Alden's original architectural effect to be for posterity. Historic wooden windows are also a greener option as they will last longer and will be subject to less wear and tear than the proposed aluminum replacements. Whatever additional short-term costs will be more than offset by long-term sustainable benefits. Our committee encourages the applicant, working with the staff, to improve the master plan to include the original window configuration and materials so that the Alden will have an effect on the Upper West Side that they can be proud of. I thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers on this item? All right, do you want to respond, or? Okay. All right, I can sense that some of the commissioners have concerns about this and recognize that historically there were 10/1 or 6/1 windows. And maybe I'm coming at this somewhat new, but I think there's certain aspects about this project which I feel we should support. One is that the existing building right now, and I think at the time of designation, never had these historical windows. I think that the idea of having this master plan is not going to take anything away from what the building is right now, but in fact may improve it, because over time, as windows change, they will actually be better than what they have right now, and will be reflective a little more, maybe not totally, but more sympathetic to the historic character in terms of the mullions as well as the color. I think that if we propose or recommend that they maintain the 6/1 and 10/1 windows, it may be very likely that those changes are not going to take place, that they may actually keep their 1/1s as they have right now, and unless they are completely falling apart, that movement towards trying to get this building back to its historic character is going to take very, very long. So I think from a practical standpoint, and even from an appropriateness standpoint, it seems that their proposal seems reasonable. Thoughts, Fred? I know you were. Mhm.
No, I think that was very well put. I mean, that's the conundrum, maybe, of all window replacement master plans. Almost all buildings at this age seem to have replaced windows, and usually getting rid of mullions along the way,
Right.
and getting rid of wood also along the way. So then the conundrum is, if you go back and approve a master plan that more rigorously follows the original plan, it might take years and years and years and years of, I mean, generations of patchwork situation, rather than continuing to have what is pretty standard, a 1/1. So, I mean, that's the conundrum we face. So either a purist or a practicalist, and you got to choose.
Right, yes, David.
Well,
Oh, sorry, Michael.
To talk a little bit about some of the things that have been done in my time on the commission, there seems to be a trend at this table to move towards the swallowing of the bitter pill of patchwork, and trying to hew a little more closely to a restoration of the original configuration, although not the original material necessarily. I think that we've approved a number of projects recently. I can't remember exactly where. I think one on the Upper East Side. I mean, there have been a few where we have asked, even in situations like this, where there have been no extant original windows, but where it's been very clear that the historic record showed a multi-pane window, and where that multi-pane window was significant to the design of the building, often in buildings that were kind of stark, like this one, where we did bite that bullet and go for that, with two thoughts in mind. First of all, as no one would be here today asking for this if these windows were not in need of replacement, and maybe it's not going to be all in the next year, but fortunately for history, the quality of the windows is very poor, and one will need to replace them. Certainly the event, there will be a period of transition, but I think that the long view is that if we put this in place as a precedent, it will over the long term improve the aesthetic, the coherence of the buildings, and restore them to a better position historically.
All right.
And I just wanted to point out, so we see a lot of these aluminum replacement windows coming, and we often talk about these 15-year lifespans of the ones they replace, and then a description on the part of the manufacturer who comes here that says these are better. But what I'm concerned about is really that we replace kind of junky stuff with sort of a contemporary version of junky stuff. And I don't have enough information from looking at those details to know whether there's a track record on the balances, that that it isn't something where in order for a master plan to actually work, you want to not be replacing the windows in 15 years that you just replaced today, right? Because
Right.
so we need to understand that these things are going to endure for what's a reasonable amount of time for a window to endure. In the old days, that was 100 years.
Right.
Now I don't know what's a reasonable expectation for a window, but I think that in terms of these master plans, we should have an extremely high standard, high minimum standard for all of the windows, and it can't just be sort of what you would do for a one-off solution on one floor where there isn't a master plan involved. And so what makes me uncomfortable about this proposal is that I don't know enough about the window. Saying the mechanism is better doesn't tell me a thing, because everyone tells me. I just had my windows repaired by sort of weebewindows.com, and he told me that the mechanism was better. He did it literally a month ago. I lifted up the window yesterday, and it starts to slide down again. It's a month of a new mechanism. So, hence my fear that if we don't kind of control this better, we will get a different kind of a patchwork.
Right, but it's,
Yeah.
is your concern, it seems like your concern may not be whether it's 1/1 or 2/1 or 4/1.
Quality. Mine's
It's
about quality.
about quality.
Yes.
Okay, and, but I think the debate right now is really about 6/1.
Well,
What-
there's two parts of the
Right.
debate, because this is actually an ongoing
Okay.
discussion we have
Right.
about crappy windows.
Right.
So, yeah, so I would want to see more information about these windows, 1/1 or 6/1. I do agree with Michael Goldblum, though, that on a building that has a lot, that doesn't have a lot of detail, that was clearly designed, where the 6/1 aspect of it was part of the decorative element, that this sort of temporary patchwork condition eventually does get taken over if the windows are good quality. Because, by the way, we also hear famous stories about people moving into a recently renovated building, the Plaza Hotel being one, and the windows are such poor quality that the owner goes ahead and changes the windows. So when you have a view of Central Park, when you know that these are very valuable units, and you have an opportunity to upgrade your windows to something much better, a lot of people will opt for that. And I think that's part of our job, is to encourage that.
Right.
Sure.
Yes.
I mean, not all buildings are created equal. An Emery Roth building is maybe a little higher level than many other more anonymous buildings, even in luxurious locations. So I think this building we should treat this building, I mean, if we're going to treat it differently, then this building deserves that form.
All right, yes, Diana?
Well, I was going to say, I'm going in a slightly different, a somewhat different direction at the moment than Fred, just in that I do think that this is a reasonable proposal for this building. I do think that individually, we need to look at each building and decide how much does the window design contribute to the overall architectural statement. And the fact that it's a fine architect doesn't necessarily mean that the windows must be, 6/6, 10/10. But in some buildings where there's very little detail, that detail of the window is really, really needed to compensate or improve or enhance the appearance. And in this case, I actually could go with the current proposal, granted the quality was adequate, as opposed to 6/6, 10/10. That's personal opinion for this building. But it is really we do see buildings where it's really essential to go with the multi-pane windows. because
Right, I
of-
can understand that, and I think that I put that lens on when I talked about this particular building, and I recognize that the commission may have and has asked for 6/6 or 10/6, 10/6. 6/1, 10/1 in other situations. I don't think that that should necessarily be the driving factor for the commission to stick to that policy if, in fact, it's warranted to be something different here. So, yes, Roberta, you want to say something?
I think that we can see both sides of it.
Right,
I
right.
think that there are cases, yes, where we say it's 1/1, and where the otherwise design of the building isn't affected by whatever the window configuration is. But I also think that in some cases, and maybe this is one, where the actual design of the window contributes to the overall impression of the building, that and if we have an opportunity to do so, that we should really go on the side of putting or asking for the 6/1 or whatever. And yes, there is a period where you only have some done and some not done. But I think that the end result, and at some point you will have an end result, maybe it's 20 years from now, but you will have something that I think we'd be proud of in terms of a building in the historic district and what we did to maintain it, to keep it at the standard. So I don't know, in this particular case, I would.
Okay.
Just one further comment that you haven't seen yet, but one of the things we've done sometimes is to mandate the upper floors or the bottom floors and have the rest be, depends on the building very much, you know, where that was a way of preserving an element but not trying to have the entire building.
All right, so it's,
Yeah.
it's, yes, you want to say something?
Primary versus secondary.
Okay, well, I think that may be a good compromise. So basically, the three facades that face Central Park and...
No, the two.
There are two, sorry, I thought it was a full block front.
82nd and Central Park.
Okay, just West 82nd and Central Park West, we could recommend or we could require that they do either 10/1 or 6/1, but the interior facades, are we okay with just allowing those to be changed? Okay. I think that seems like a good compromise.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, right. That's fine? Okay.
I appreciate the longer discussion.
It's quandary.
Well, I feel like it'll come up
talk
again and
about it
again,
every
and,
year.
yeah, right. And maybe there'll be a case where everybody will be on board to allow it to go, but in this case, I think we've come up with a reasonable, well, this is a good compromise, and I think that gives them at least half of what they want. So I think we can close the hearing then, yes? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Who wants to do the honors for Fred? You want to do the honors?
In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness for 225 Central Park West in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District, the application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of windows. I recommend approval, noting that all windows at the primary facade have been replaced, some prior to designation and some with Landmark Preservation Commission permits, and therefore the work will not result in the removal of significant historic fabric. That the proposed aluminum windows will match the historic wood windows in terms of operation and details. That the profile of the proposed aluminum paneling will more closely match the profile of the original wood brick mold. That the proposed brown baked-on enamel finish is consistent with finishes on woods historically found on buildings of this age and style. That precedent exists for other buildings on this, of this age and style having been designed. No, we'll not have that. Skip that one, sorry. That the primary facades on 82nd Street and Central Park West will have a master plan with 6/1, or I think I heard 8/1, maybe 10/1. 10/1.
And 6 over 1.
Yeah.
And 6/1. Mullions. That the secondary facades will have 1/1 windows, replacement windows, and that the establishment of a master plan for window replacement will ensure uniformity of fenestration in the building over time, a long time.
Um,
Is that enough? Did I say it enough? Okay, so this is second, okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this motion has been passed.